So Larry, I know that you have many books out, and I know about the Beyond the Backbeat book. That is a really nice book. Do you want to talk a little bit about your book experiences?
Yeah, well, I think you know, a lot of the DVDs or books that I've done have come from a need. You know, somebody said, "Hey, we need somebody to write something about this," and would you like to do it? And I said, "Yeah." But as far as the so that's not to downplay what's in those particular ones, but as far as Beyond the Backbeat goes, that was really the first one that was completely my idea from the beginning of what it was going to be, and the book's done really well, and I think it's simply because it struck a nerve with people. I think that people know when they hear the truth, like I think even instinctually, you know, even if they don't know admit it or whatever. And I've always had, to a certain extent, to a fault, the ability to kind of say what I think and you know, be a little bit outspoken, you know. So I think some of what I put in there, a lot of people may not have put in there for fear that people are going to kind of look at it and go like, this guy's missing the point. And why that is that, you know, as we've talked before, you know, people look at styles as these vastly different things a lot of times, or somewhat unrelated, or at least using a different alphabet or whatever. And I always thought that that was never really the case or even close to it. I think that there's a pretty finite amount of rhythms that, you know, music styles and rhythmic styles all over the world share. And it's just a reapplication of them, or a hearing them in a different context, which is the thing that makes them sound so different. And they, you know, in the strict sense of the word, they are different, you know, but rhythmically, they're not so different at all. And what I do in Beyond the Backbeat is I just start with a backbeat groove, because it was kind of geared towards people coming from that background. And I morph the groove into a groove that they feel very uncomfortable with, or they think of as very foreign. Like I might start, you know, with funk and then end up in samba, you know, in 5 or 6 steps, or, you know, start with, you know, funk and end up in songo. And that's kind of what I did, you know, coming up, I guess, lack of a better way to say it. You know, I always thought there was a certain amount of ignorance on my part that was an asset, because I didn't stop to think so much, oh, this is a certain style and I have to be this and I have to make sure I do this. I just kind of play what I played, and I would kind of form it to what's going on, you know, and I'd kind of learn on the fly. But that's basically what that book is, you know, just starting with a groove and saying, okay, you're comfortable with this, now just kind of change this, you know, step 1, step 2, change the bass drum a little bit like that, and they're still kind of looking at it from the other angle, but it's like, oh, guess what, you're playing a samba now, you know what I mean? So, and I think that's why it's done well, because it's just, I think it's logical, it makes sense, and people feel like that too, you know.
You were talking to me about a yet unreleased book that you are doing, right?
Yeah, I actually have quite a few books I'm going to be putting out over the next year or so, and all self-produced. So I'm in the. This is one that's it's not quite ready to release yet, and as you can see, I'm still getting my my Photoshop skills and stuff down. So you know, doing the whole thing is a different thing, but it's actually been a great experience. But this one here, Time, Tempo, and Transition, or Tempo and Time Transition, I should say, is the one that's closest to being out, and I just have to do the CD for it. And this is almost on the same topic, or similar to the Beyond the Backbeat. It's kind of simplifying the view of everything as best I can. I started thinking at some point that people were doing too many, we're breaking technique up into too many parts and not seeing the relationship between all of them. And so I used to tell my students, I'd say, okay, when you practice, sit down and you know, play a beat, and then leave the metronome on whatever tempo it's on, you know. Pull out a snare drum book and play a snare drum piece, you know, and then start working on, I don't know, a Latin groove, but leave the metronome, like don't get up and change it, make it a whole new thing. And I would just tell them, and I would switch things up a lot like that. And I thought to myself, well, you know what, maybe I should write some stuff like that. And so that's what I started doing with these. and I have a lot of these now. I'll be able to put out a few versions of this, but like this, for instance, like the tri-groove etude, where from the traditional way, or the maybe not the traditional, but the more modern kind of philosophy of drums, I think, to a certain extent. From that vantage point, this is going to look arbitrary. Like, well, you're playing a shuffle, then you're playing a snare drum thing, then you're playing kind of a jazz blues thing, then you're playing flanger. You know, it's going to look like that. But in reality, that's what you're doing when you're playing. You're incorporating that stuff all the time. So even to just play from line to line and play something at the same tempo as you were playing something else. Actually, maybe I should give you a real quick example of it.
Yeah, let's do it.
If you have somebody working on playing fives and just in double stroke roll as triples.
So what page is that in the book?
This would be, what page is that actually? This is page 30, no, that's 31.
Awesome.
My eyes, I think I need my glasses in. So this is really the concept of the whole book actually, right here, is there's different aspects of playing, or what I started calling the different elements of playing. Like you could have, you know, you're playing on the snare drum, you could have times when you're playing more throughout the kit. You'd have things that are very staccato kind of movement, you know? Like if I'm playing a funk groove and I'm playing, you know, that is like very staccato kind of movement in a way, you know, and also compact. But then if I'm playing, you know, or I don't know, I could be like, you know, very legato kind of, you know?
Yeah.
And I started realizing that that's the stuff that makes people change tempos more than anything when they're going from one to the other. And it all comes down to transitioning and being able to play everything in your vocabulary at one tempo. Not all at the same tempo all the time, but in other words, like, here's 80 beats per minute, you know? What can you play of your vocabulary there, and how can you relate it? So this here, for instance, like I'll have, let the first line be just straight ahead, you know, shuffle, and then the second line might be this. And so forth down the page. Now, a lot of people look at that like, okay, you're playing a shuffle and then you're working on a snare drum piece. And I've had people say that to me too when I started doing some of this. Why are you working on a snare drum piece? And then the next thing you kind of go into a rock thing. And I'll say, well, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, is we think of these things as unrelated things and things that are different musical issues, where in reality they're actually mechanics that we have to have down, like, all together. Because if I'm playing, just right there, I'm already incorporating that stuff, and it's like, it's all always happening, you know. Hopefully not too much, we don't want to play too busy, but that's basically what this whole book is about. They're all like one page, with the exception of a couple at the end are 2 pages. 1 page examples, and I name them like little interesting things, maybe things that might, that I was inspired by, you know, like it might have been a tune that inspired me to write it, or a couple of drummers who, you know, I grew up listening to, or whatever. So it's pretty interesting, and you know, this, at the risk of sounding like an infomercial, when I've been using this stuff with my students, it's really had a bigger impact, I think, than anything that I've ever worked with my students.